Good afternoon. We're just going to wait a few moments while people are still joining the room. Thank you for joining us. We're going to wait a few more moments. We still have people entering. A few more moments. Good afternoon. My name is Sam Fletcher, and I am the New York State Executive Director of NASW. I really messed up how I said that there, but I think you know what I'm talking about. I want to thank you for joining us today for this very important panel. This is our second 9/11 panel. We started last Thursday with our first panel, and then we continued our 9/11 discussions and topics on Friday 9/11 with Mike Shermatz, who's also on the panel today. He provided a continuing ed training on moral injury. And today is our final 9/11 event with our second panel of veterans. I first of all want to thank every veteran on this panel for contributing their time to the chapter and helping us develop our veterans programming and our panels and everything else we do with veterans, and for also giving of their time on this very important topic of 9/11. We're asking them to tell their stories and share with themselves so people can understand the impact that 9/11 had on each service member, whether they're a Vietnam veteran all the way until if they joined because of 9/11. It's really important that we hear their stories and we understand what happened to our service people and how 9/11 impacted them. Just like it impacted those of us who were, alive and adults during that time. We all remember what happened on 9/11 for us. This date is even more impactful to the veterans who served. So I just want to thank everyone, and I just want to remind you this is not for continuing education credit. This is just a panel so that we can learn together and really develop ourselves professionally by hearing from the professionals. So you will be hearing from each of the panelists telling their stories, and then there'll be time at the end for some questions. If you have any technical difficulties, you can write in the chat box. You can find the chat box at the bottom of your screen. There's also a Q&A box. You can put your questions in the Q&A box and we'll take those at the end, but you can put them in anytime. If you want to change your view of your screen in the top right-hand corner, you can click on speaker view, and that will change how whether you see the whole panel or just the panelist speaking. If you have any questions, again, put them in the chat box, and me and Amelia will be monitoring the chat box throughout the talk to be able to assist you in any way. So thank you again, and now I'm going to hand it to your facilitator, Tony.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank all of you who have decided to participate and join in on this seminar. My name is Tony Ramoska. I'm an Air Force retired lieutenant colonel, having served from 1966 to 1986. On the day of 9/11, I did not find out about the tragedy until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd been out fly fishing on the Delaware River with two of my dearest friends, and it wasn't until 4 o'clock when we stopped in at a general store to get a hot cup of coffee. I was looking at the TV along with my two friends, and I asked the woman behind the counter, "What action film are you watching?" And that was when it hit us all. Our ride home, which was about 50 miles from the river, was pretty much wrapped in silence. Neither one of us had much to say. None of us had cell phones back then, so it was really a difficult time. And my thoughts were, quite honestly, about my three of our adult children who lived and worked in the New York City area. One of the things that I was certain I wanted to do when I got home was tell my wife that somehow I was going to be involved in working, down at the World Trade Center. Actually, a lot of people don't realize that had the president declared a national emergency, he could have asked for those of us who had retired to come back, on active duty. That didn't happen. I did have a friend who was the director of the Red Cross chapter here in our hometown, and she gave me the navigational aids to figure out a way to get down there to help out. One of the things that I looked at was when I wanted to go. Obviously, the response initially was incredible. There were literally thousands of people who wanted to get down there to do something. As a mental health professional, that was the arena that I wanted to be involved in, and ultimately, I received word that I would be assigned from the 20th of December to the 5th of January. It just, timing-wise, it worked out very well because our family was quite spread out, and I thought, well, you know, there's got to be a lot of people down there who would love to get home, you know, and be with their loved ones. I have to say, with all candor, that you never forget the horrendous scene that is there. It's one thing to see it on a video. It's another thing to see iconic photographs of the devastation. But when you're there alongside, you know, the cavernous pit that was there where the towers once stood, and you smell the acrid smoke and dust, and when the wind blew, and you watched the crews coming in and out of the pit, full of dust and just weary, and then you meet people that had been there for many months. Some had not had a break at all. It was a horrendous experience that is hardwired in my brain. 9/11, when I'm alone, it's usually the best time that I have in terms of reflecting. I'm not one to shout about, celebrating in any way, shape, or form, or anything like that. I just want to be reflective and think about the scenes and wonder why it all happened. Again, it was an attack on our country, and having served for 20 years, that idea was just impossible to accept, but there it was, and it really changed our lives, as you all know. My assignment initially when I got there was to work at the big white tent. It was a football-sized field tent that was erected, and that was where the construction crews and the fire department folks came in to catch a breather. If they were down in the pit and had to take showers and come on in, and then they would just rest, get some food. And what we were doing as Red Cross volunteers were basically, we were providing what amounted to psychological first aid. Most of the time we're just having conversations, shooting the breeze with folks. We did have one section of the tent that was basically for people who wanted to catch a few winks, and we would wake them after a certain period of time. They would say how long they wanted to rest, and they'd get on and get back to work. My second part of my trip down there was at the Family Support Center. And that was a really moving experience in terms of understanding and recognizing the enormous impact that it had on people who lost their businesses, lost their homes, and were just struggling to make ends meet. Our job there was to keep an eye on most of the people who were doing the interviews because of the vicarious pain and trauma that they were experiencing, having listened to so many terrible stories, tragic stories. The experience, as I said, is hardwired in my brain and will be there for a long time. The one thing that I do love about the experience that I will never forget is how we all came together. People from all over the country were there, north, south, east, and west. It was an incredible experience, and it really was an extraordinary manifestation of what it really means to be American. I'm really saddened that hasn't continued for some reason, and I hope we can get back to it someday. The other thing that I truly got in touch with was the whole concept of service to our country. I had certainly been raised by all my uncles and aunts who had experienced World War II. I was born during World War II. Their concept of service to country was in their DNA. And I recognized that that was still a part of me too. And I was really quite pleased that I had taken the opportunity to do that. And I'm certainly hoping that we can find our way back to those post 9/11 days early on, when we were truly an America that everybody would be proud of. That's my little story. What I'd like to do now is turn it over to our first presenter, and that will be Alyssa. Alyssa, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep.
I feel like a Verizon commercial. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I don't even know if that catchphrase still exists, but that's all right. I'll bring that back. So thank you very much, Tony, for your experience, for your sharing, and for your moderating all of this today. My name is Alyssa Gibbons. I am a former Navy Medical Service Corps officer. I was not in the military on 9/11. I was not even a social worker on 9/11. I was a brand new MSW grad student. Literally in week 2, maybe 2.5, I don't even know, some weird time frame is that. I was a graduate assistant in our university's career center because I was an out-of-state student at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte, and tuition's expensive and loans are fun. So I needed to have some way to eat more than ramen and buy more than $1 worth of gas, things. So anyway, and we had planned, every fall they have a career fair where they have tables and booths and all that kind of stuff for employers coming on, whatever. And so I remember it was a Tuesday. We were in the basketball arena, I think is where we were. It was a giant campus place, I don't know. And we were getting stuff set up. I remember what I was wearing, khaki pants and a denim shirt, because we all had to be in some kind of uniform. I'm sure there's a parallel there somewhere, but so that way we all knew, even though we all knew who each other was, because it was going to be so busy, we wanted there to be some kind of recognition for those who were there with their businesses or whatever, that, hey, I can go run and get you this, I can do, whatever. Anyway, so I can remember being there bright and squirrely early, and we were getting things set up. And there was a spot in the arena, I don't know, a conference room or some such thing as that, where there was TVs and stuff set up, and there was, the coffee and the donuts and places people could go for a little bit of a break or whatever. And I can remember when the first plane hit Tower 1, it was just this, oh my goodness, this horrible, horrible accident has happened. Like, can you imagine, how on earth could this happen? And all of us standing there thinking, oh, what a horrible tragedy, like, wow. And then just as that was starting to settle, then Tower 2 was hit. And I can remember knowing in that moment what that meant. It was just there, and I knew what it meant. I can't really explain how I knew what it meant, other than I just knew we'd been attacked, and this was bad, obviously. I watched two of our presenters that were there were our Air Force and Army ROTC program, so Reserve Officer Training Command Component. I don't ever remember what the C stands for, so I apologize for those who do. but it's one of the entry routes to military service. Anyway, neither here nor there. I literally, it's like within 45 seconds, maybe, of Tower 2 being hit, I watched them pack up their booth in 45 seconds flat, because they also knew what, I mean, they just knew. And they're like, okay, the day just got a lot busier and we've got places we need to go and be and things we need to do. And see ya. I think they left some pamphlets on the tables. I don't remember. But obviously the rest of the day, I mean, everybody knew that that was just that. Once the Pentagon, once we all got word, and so cell phones were still kind of newish. It was, news was dribbling in bits and pieces, you know, piecemeal throughout. And we were trying, as staff trying to run the event, trying to kind of figure out logistics and all that kind of stuff. And once we got word that the Pentagon had also been hit, I don't think I've seen as many people run for the bank of payphones that was still in the lobby. I don't even know if people today even remember what payphones look like, let alone a wall of like 30 of them. But there was a bank of payphones, and I remember seeing every single one of them lined up, filled, and a line behind them, because anybody who was in the arena, who was working the event, needed to be making phone calls. And I remember finally being able to get to a phone to call and ask my mother, who lives here in New York State. When my father was traveling at the time for a computer company doing trainings, and I knew he was somewhere, but I didn't know where. And so needing to know that he was okay. And so I got through to her. I think all I said was, hey, it's me. And she immediately knew why I was calling. She's like, he's fine, he's on the ground, he's not traveling today, or today was a rest day. And that was it. I'm like, okay, gotta go. And that was it, because there were like 20 people behind me who needed to be making the same phone calls to make sure, or worse, or get news of worse. And then so as the morning went, I mean, I remember even not having an awareness of engineering and how buildings like work, and thinking that in some little Pollyanna-esque part of my brain, okay, they put out the fire in the towers, and so we're good, everything is okay. No, they've managed to contain the whatever, and we're fine. And I remember the director of the Career Center saying to me, no, the towers have fallen. And anyway, in those moments, knowing that I needed to respond in some fashion, feeling this, as Tony calls it, a pull to service. I can remember going back to my school, my class, and saying, we need to do something. We are social workers in training. We need to respond. This is our country. This is my state. You know, this is, you know, whatever. We need to do something. And they were all like, yeah, we'll do something. Well, yeah. And it fizzled for a lot of them, which is fine. And it took me a couple of years from that point, and about 45 pounds less, to eventually become an active duty social worker, which is its own journey all on its own, which I don't think I have enough time for today, which is fine. But it was like, I can remember getting the pamphlet, and I was married, knowing what it would mean to call the recruiter, knowing what it could mean. And we didn't have children yet, didn't know if we could have children. And my husband saying to me, you want to do something. You want to do something more and be a part of something more. And this, you come from a military family, which is true. And that's something more. I picked up the phone the next day, called the recruiter, had an appointment, and 6 months later, I was raising my right hand, and off I went. 3.5 years later, fast forward, deployment to Bahrain, in the Middle East, leaving a 2.5-year-old and my husband home in Chicago, where I was stationed at the hospital that supported boot camp world and things, and was gone for almost a year, 11 and a half months. Not that I'm counting the days, but 11 and a half long months. And came home. Yeah, that's a whole other story as well. In the year and a half after I came home from deployment, not making promotion from 03 to 04, the first go round, and doing everything. I had checked every single box twice, and then doing it again the next year, and the same result. I know when Sharon shared her own experience on Thursday, I felt such a strong pull to kind of talk about that as well, because it is the stigma that's out there. And how do you describe that or explain that to folks in a way that they won't look at you and wonder what you did or didn't do while in the military? But it's something that's real. It's part of my journey. So in essence, I'm going to wrap it up with it. It actually helped bring me here in this fashion, because I now work at my VA and I love the work that I do. I love the team I work with. I love serving my people, working with my people. They're my people. It's my hospital. And it's my hospital. Don't mess with me. Anyway, but it's had that not happened, and it's been almost 5 years. Good Lord, time flies when you're having fun. Then I wouldn't have found the work here. I wouldn't have been a part of this, and I wouldn't be here doing this. I would still be serving and I would be loving it. I would probably be anxious and worrying about all the things that just go with being an officer in the military. But here, I'm working, I'm still serving. And that service to country, that service to mission, yeah, it looks a little different, but it's still there. And anyway, I've probably gone over time. I'm so sorry, but I'm done now.
If I may just interrupt for a moment, you talked about 02, 03 to 04. You want to explain what that is, because a lot of civilians may be listening.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. So because I had a little over 6 years civilian clinical experience, I went in as a 03, so a lieutenant in the Navy, which is
the captain in the Army and the Air Force.
Thank you. I was like, you think I would know that, because I would have soldiers call me captain all the time on deployment. I'd be like, sweet, can you make my pay agree? Anyway, no. But anyway, no, anyway, but so I went in as a full lieutenant with time and grade, which I don't know. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation, but yes. So, but I did make 04. The IRR, Individual Ready Reserve, promoted me 6 months after I got out. So I proudly have my oak leaf, y'all. It was interesting. They gave me the option of turning that down, and I'm like, no, I worked for that sucker. I earned that sucker. I'm putting that on things. You betcha. So yes.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Michael, are you ready? You're up. Michael, are you there?
Yes. Yep, I am here. I was just unmuting myself. So thanks, Alyssa. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Sam. Definitely happy to be here. Also humbled with the opportunity to, share a personal narrative about, September 11th and, how it's impacted my life. I guess to start off, letting everybody know that September 11th also is my birthday. So for me, it was an extremely unique, I'm sure there are, I'm curious if there are other people here that also have a 9/11 birthday. And, a unique experience in that on that day, I'm celebrating my birth, my life, and then contrasting that with a day that has become a day of loss for so many people, and a day, that, is equated to, the loss of so much more than just life for so many other people. And it's always been something that I've reflected on, and I still don't know if I've, you know, had the ability to fully make meaning of what, you know, why did I happen to be somebody who was born on a day where, you know, I was 16 at the time. I was a junior in high school. You know why and this was something as a 16-year-old that I think I struggled with even more. You know, is there a meaning to this? You know, is there some kind of connection between me being born on this day and then this happening? You know, and what do I do with that? Obviously, it took a while for the, you know, the full scope of what had happened for it to really sink in. And, you know, I remember exactly where I was in my high school and how I was just kind of like frozen in place, you know, as I was walking down a back hallway, and I happened to like see a bunch of people crowded around a television set in a lunchroom, and I poked my head in, and next thing I know, like an hour later, I was like, oh, wow, I should probably like, you know, go to class or something like that. Not that it mattered, you know, everybody was just kind of, everything, like time kind of stopped essentially, and nothing happened the rest of the day. I mean, TVs were on in every classroom, and, you know, it was just one of those moments where you know, you had, I think it was helpful being around other people and sharing in that, just that shock, and knowing that you weren't the only one who didn't have words to put to what you were witnessing. And, you know, so moving through that, you know, and I also remember, this is kind of funny, there was a kid who was in my grade, and I remember him running up and down the hallways at some point during the day yelling, "It's bin Laden, it's bin Laden, it's bin Laden." And like, at this point, you know, I mean, I don't know how many people in high school knew who the heck Osama bin Laden was at the time. I sure didn't. And then, you know, come to find out that this kid that everybody was kind of like looking side-eyed at was actually right. So again, just another interesting observation that, you know, sticks with me very vividly. And then something interesting happened a couple of weeks after. The Buffalo News, which is a local newspaper. I'm from Buffalo, New York, which is in Western New York. The Bills are 1-0, in case anybody wasn't paying attention to football yesterday. So, and the Buffalo News kind of like canvassed for Western New Yorkers that had birthdays that were on September 11th. And I, you know, I think my mom told me, and I said, yeah, I'd be interested in getting involved in like doing some kind of story about that. And they came around and they did interviews with everybody that volunteered to be a part of the piece that they were doing. And having the chance to kind of lead up to that and reflecting leading up to that interview, and then having that interview really solidified in me that, you know, I feel that this is like my calling to do something more, you know, something bigger than myself, something, you know, that, you know, allows my ability to have been somebody who wasn't lost in 9/11 to, you know, to contribute, you know, in honor of those people, and everybody that was affected by it, not just the people that were lost. So that interview then led me to make the decision that I wanted to pursue an ROTC opportunity at Canisius College. And it was, you know, it was that was really what motivated me to look into ROTC, and then to apply for a scholarship through the ROTC program, which I eventually was awarded one, and that kind of set the course for, you know, so many other things that happened in my life. And you know, that the coming together of people during that time, you know, was just unbelievable. And I think that really resonated in me that, you know, like I want to be a part of like a community you know, that's like, that's, you know, foundationally built on this idea that like we're stronger together, you know, than we are apart. And, you know, despite, you know, great, ROTC is Reserve Officer Training Corps. So that's it's a program that you go through throughout your college years with the intention of graduating and immediately commissioning as an officer. For me in the Army, they do them, I'm pretty sure, for every branch in the military, ROTC programs. And then you commission as in the Army as a second lieutenant. And usually you go, depending on your scholarship, you're usually required to do active duty service afterwards. For me, it was a minimum of 4 years. Thank you for asking. Please, if like there's acronyms that are thrown out there and we don't elaborate on what they mean, just, you know, throw that in there. So I went for a scholarship. I had to work my butt. I mean, I got myself in excellent shape. I probably lost like 20 or 30 pounds because I was a football player, so I was a little heavy. And, you know, like I was just like, as soon as it's odd for me as a 16-year-old to have this moment where I'm like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. Like, how many people at 16 are like, nope, this is my plan. I'm going in this direction, and I'm not letting anybody sway me from that. And I did. I went head on, and I like never second guessed it. I was awarded a scholarship. I went to school, and I just loved I was all in. And I know like deep down inside of me, like to my core, that like there was this, you know, connection to what happened on 9/11 that was like fueling my passion to be, you know, in the armed forces. And that stayed with me through all 4 years of college. And I did really well in my program. I was out of like a commissioning class of like 3,000 people across the country. I was in like the top 100 graduates that were commissioning. And so I just like this happened because of 9/11. Like this, I can't say that this wouldn't have happened had 9/11 not occurred, but the chances would have been significantly less. And I went active duty, and I did my 4 years active duty, one deployment to Iraq. And I felt as though I had done something, but not enough. And obviously transitioning out of the military, I had my own journey, which I'm still on. But ultimately through everything, it led me back to working with veterans. It led me into a peer support role. You know, like I went away from my military connections when I got out, and then realized, I'm like, man, I have to come back. I'm not living an authentic life, not allowing this part of me to still live itself out. And then I managed a peer support program for veterans. And then I went back to school to get my master's in social work. And I've been working for a year and a half at an outpatient behavioral health clinic. And I'm actually starting at the VA in like 2 weeks to the day. So like this journey, you know, and it's not just military that were impacted. I mean, you know, the fact that like I now have the opportunity to continue this service, to continue working with people that have been impacted by September 11th, you know, directly or indirectly. And it's still giving me this feeling that like I am honoring those people that were lost or impacted through my service. You know, my desire to serve anybody in the best way that I can, in whatever way that I can, you know, as a clinician now, because we have no idea how 9/11 impacted individuals, you know, to the extent, unless we hear those stories. And that's why I'm really glad to be here, because like we're sharing these stories, we're creating more meaning. We're through the sharing of these stories, we're honoring the people, you know, that were, you know, on ground zero that day, the people that were lost, the families that were impacted. And it's just it's beautiful to continue to come together over this, even though it's such a harrowing day, but for our humanity to continue to, you know, be at the core of all of this, inspires me to keep, doing what I'm doing, and, wanting to make those connections with people, because if we can keep doing that, then we never lose the spirit of those people that are no longer here, as a result of that. So it's just, I'm sure any of us that are on this panel could probably talk for an hour about how this impacted us, and it's hard to put it into 10 to 12 minutes. And it's funny, as I was preparing for this, I have this book that my mom bought me. Life magazine put this out soon after, and it's really it's an awesome kind of just like memoir of the day, so to speak. And it sits on my bookshelf, and I leaf through it from time to time, because we say never forget, right? And how do we never forget? We never forget by never stopping sharing, what this means to us. And now going into a generation where there are people that did not experience this, they were not alive for this, and for us to continue to express the importance of what this day means to all Americans, regardless of your involvement or not, I just think is something that we all owe the people that were lost during that day. So thank you for listening, allowing me to share my story. I appreciate it, and I look forward to discussing later in the webinar. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Ward, are you ready?
I am, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. And to those listening, really everybody has their own experience, their own story. God, thinking about where you were at that time, it's foundational. But let me bring a little levity to it. So I was, there's some real heroes here, and there's certainly some heroes at the time. Not this guy. So I was a social worker. I was just out of grad school, and I was working down in Connecticut, which is right near New Haven, right near where this was all happening. I was with a hospital called the 865th Combat Sport Hospital. So when everything happened, I was working with some students at a college when it all occurred, and came back, and I was in charge of a bunch of teenagers. I was, again, brand new to the military. I don't know if you know much about the male modeling process, but that didn't work out. So I went into social work, and I was just commissioned as a first lieutenant, meaning, kind of at the bottom rung of the officer status. And, I was just into exercise and trying to do something cool, but like Tony, really patriotic, and like Alyssa and Mike as well, that sense of just love this country, would do anything for it. It's kind of a quiet thing, never really shared with people, but being in the military was a huge shift. So found that I was surrounded by people with that same mentality. It was pretty cool. But a student of history, when I talked to somebody about what was going on, a friend of mine said there was 8 attacks simultaneously, and it seemed pretty overwhelming. And this is definitely an act of war. This is a Pearl Harbor moment. And I did know that at the end of World War II, one of our bombers had crashed into the Empire State Building, and there'd been 11 or 12 deaths, but the building was still there. This was obviously very intentional. And then the situation with the Pentagon occurred, I think, within a couple hours. We found about that, and then the field in Pennsylvania, and boom, we were at war. So my unit was activated, the hospital up near Hartford, and we anticipated a mass casualty situation. So we've been preparing to some degree for that. So we got ready, and just getting equipment going, and the engines ready to turn over, and then we were called off. So that was kind of the end of my 9/11 experience per se. But then kind of what happened next is really what changed my life, to be honest. So about a year and a half later, I was activated to go to Iraq. That was the intent and the assumption. Abu Ghraib had just happened. This was in a major event in the news where a prison, terrible things were happening in American detainment operations. So POWs, as they were called, or EPWs, enemy prisoners of war, were being mistreated. So a bunch of social workers, of all things, were organized to go and put an end to that. So instead, we were made into this attachment and sent down to Fort Benning. So just like in the Vietnam era, military just collected in one point and had a couple months to prepare and train. This isn't good modeling in terms of how to have unit cohesion all the way through in the process, but hey, it's what happened. So we were there, and I was the officer at that time in charge of this group of about 60 or 70, mostly reservists. And we trained up and were sent off on Valentine's Day to not to Iraq at all, but to Afghanistan. And the mission was really unclear. So I showed up in Afghanistan like, okay, I'm the social worker, I'm ready to go. What am I doing? And nobody had any idea. So they sent me over to the lady in charge of MP operations. So they're the ones that handle detainment. And I said, look, we can do some social work, some psych stuff. What can we do to help? She said, what you should do is go back to America, to Leavenworth, which is the Army prison. That's the right word. And yep, and it's really well run. Go back there and learn how to do some stuff, and maybe you can help us. So boom, I'm flying out to Leavenworth, spent a week there, figuring out how to come up with, some ways we could help with detainment operations and prevent another Abu Ghraib, which arguably is directly linked to 9/11. Everything is connected, as you know. So on the way back and the many flights, many hours, I put together this 8-point plan. It was really, super altruistic. We could create this level system and manage these detainees. We can have like Red Cross. We could pay people to, they could send money back to their families if they have jobs, and we could have this educational program. I knew it was all going to get thrown out, but the idea was kind of cool, and I was excited, and still enthusiastic young officer. I show up, I'm exhausted. I go right to sleep. And I just check in. And then an hour later, some private wakes me up. He's like, hey, the colonel needs to see you right now. I'm like, this is not good. By the way, Tony here was a colonel. Colonels are pretty scary and powerful. And so I haven't even shaved, and I roll in, and there she is. She said, we've read your reports, and we're going to do everything. I was completely stunned. It doesn't usually work like that. So, oh my God. So I spent the next year organizing this system. We created education programs so that we had like 800 detainees at any one time, and they could learn to read and write Pashto and Dari, literally so they could read the Quran, which is a largely peaceful book in many ways. And a lot of mullahs, leaders in Afghanistan, would kind of preach the darker side of the Quran. And so now this gave these detainees, in theory, at least an opportunity to do that. And then they could start doing some work, making some money. They could work within this level system. And I became the International Red Cross liaison to the Army. So I was walking around with them, making sure that really no bad things were happening. The entire time I witnessed 3 events that I called out some soldiers. Hey, I think you're being a little hard on this guy. But, they were really cool. Like, yeah, I'm just really tired, sir, blah, blah, blah. But I always struggled with one thing, which was that here we are, this republic, on democratic principles, coming to the other countries, like, here's how you could do it. You could do democracy. It could be done. Meanwhile, we're capturing people because honestly, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time for whatever reason, and holding them against their will without trial, without an opportunity to defend themselves for like a year, 2 years. Meanwhile, no or minimal communication with their families, who are often starving to death or dying. There's a lot of unknowns. And it was really difficult to be providing psychiatric services. We set up this whole complicated system to make sure they had terrific resources. At the same time, to have that conundrum morally. And that was a struggle. It was also a struggle, to be honest, to be away from family for such a period of time. I was a young father and had little kids at home, and I was really good to come home at the end of it. And ultimately, President Bush at the time was notified of our education program that I had, magically invented in a plane, thinking no one was going to pay attention. And I wound up winning some awards that I'm really proud of, and took that kind of leadership home and created a business that now is this huge success across the state in reinventing the counseling as it's done, arguably because of my experience in combat, which really is because of Abu Ghraib, which very much happened because of 9/11. So that time, although, you know, at the moment I didn't know it, later in my life now as a professional, I'm realizing what a huge impact it had. And it's a particular honor to speak, you know, with these people that really are heroes and kind of share my small little piece that in the true Army style, you're one tiny cog, you know, one bit of a finger in a much larger operation that's just part of where our country should be going. It's nice to be stepping down a bit from Afghanistan and almost out of Iraq and not in any new wars, I guess. It's nice to be less of the world's police force and more maybe of a mentor-leader relationship, but that's another thing entirely. I would be very interested personally to hear more from the panel, from not just the panel, but the people watching about where they were as social workers, you know, as Americans during this time that has completely changed the way we see the world and the way we've interacted. You could argue that World War III occurred with the Cold War. It just was hot in certain points, but thank God a massive war didn't occur. And you could argue that subsequently World War IV is happening right now, and that might be the war against Islamic fundamentalism versus maybe democracy or a free market. And then we're in the middle of something bigger and strategic, but that's not why we're here right now. So I hope that's useful. And there is my little bit of a story, and I'll sign off. Thank you.
Thank you, Wood. I just want to make a comment about something you said that I think is really important for civilians to hear, and that is you were able to span the gap between military life and your experiences there, and put it to good use in the civilian world. And I think that there's a lot of that goes untapped as far as veterans when they leave service, and civilians not being able to recognize, you know, some of those experiences and how valuable they can continue to be, you know, in the civilian world. Venetia, I want to say Venetia because I'm Italian. Venetia, I'm sure I'm still making a mess of your first name.
That's okay. It's Venetia.
Okay, that sounds more Italian.
It's more Italian than you think.
There you go.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you to all the panelists and everybody who was watching. So September 11th was very interesting for me. I had just migrated from the US, from Trinidad, so I was born in an island. And I started college in 2001, and I lived with some of my relatives in Brooklyn. So we were right in the midst of everything. I was sleeping when the first plane hit. I was awakened by my cousin saying, we just got attacked by, the plane just hit the World Trade Center. And I got out of bed. I was like, what? And I'm looking at the TV and it looked like a movie to me. And while watching, the second plane hit. And I was just in awe. It was unbelievable. So I went upstairs. We lived on the 4th floor at that time. So I went up to the roof and I could see the smoke from the city. And it was dark and just chaotic. My cousin, he worked at the World Trade Center, but he was late that morning. And so I tried calling him because cell phones were just being introduced, and all the reception, all the towers were down. So we couldn't get in touch with him. So we were worried. And within 45 minutes to an hour, he runs through the door and there's soot all over him. He ran all the way from Manhattan to Brooklyn, and he was out of breath, just so scared and timid. I've never seen him like that, just like a little boy, like really scared. And we were just so emotional by that. Friday, I wanted to go back a little bit. Friday, I'm never in my car when, you know, the radio stations are talking about 9/11. I'm always at work, so I'm never listening to the radio. But for some reason on Friday, I was in my car driving while they were giving all the tributes online on the radio. And I was bawling the whole way. I drove from Auburn to Rochester. And I'm getting emotional now talking about it. But I felt like I didn't know that I was still so very emotional about that experience. And I felt like I've never really dealt with it. But now I know that it still hits really close to home. And talking about it definitely makes me feel better. So I'm actually very happy that I'm in such a supportive audience. So after that happened, after September 11th happened, I decided that I wanted to do something greater and something better. So I joined the Navy, and I was a support equipment technician. So I worked directly with the aircraft that was the support equipment that used to make the aircraft fly. So it was directly part of us executing our retaliations, basically. And I felt that actually felt a little bit rewarding for me. I did stay, I was deployed to the Mediterranean, and I was deployed to Afghanistan, boots on ground, as an advisor to the Afghan Air Force. So I was deployed with a coalition unit. So it consisted of Army, Air Force, some of the Lithuanians, because they were very familiar with the aircraft that the Afghans flew. And it was a very interesting cultural shock, I would say. After coming home from Afghanistan, I decided to leave the military because I wasn't married, I didn't have any children, and I wanted to start a family. I just chose to wait until I was out of the service to do that, because I've seen so many of my counterparts have children, and then they would go off to deploy for a year and a half at a time. And I just didn't want to miss the little things, walking first words. So that's a choice that I personally made. So I got out in 2013 and decided that I wanted to serve veterans again. So my first job, I worked with low-income individuals, but we also had a grant that helped with veterans finding housing. And as soon as that opportunity came up, I jumped right on it. So I worked there for a little bit, and then I transferred to where I work now. And it is the most rewarding experience. And once again, it did stem from 9/11, but I'm still serving in a different capacity. I'm kind of like getting everything that I want. I can still serve. I can still be with my family, which is of utmost importance to me. And that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to go back and get my MSW, because I feel I'm kind of stuck. I can only serve to a certain capacity, because I do work with veterans who have mental health issues, you know, and I can't help them the way that I want to, because our program is not clinical. And that's the reason why I've decided to go back and get my MSW, so I can work in a wider capacity. So it is important that it is self-fulfilling to be able to work with veterans and be able to serve them as a veteran myself. And it is important to have that peer support piece, because they just open up to you. I mean, sometimes they have underlying issues that they just wouldn't discuss with anybody else. So I definitely see that as an asset to being a veteran, and as well as a social worker. And thank you for all of the comments there. Thank you. And I'm sorry for breaking down. I knew that was going to happen. So, well, once again, I just didn't realize how emotional I honestly was, and how much it still bothered me that this happened. And that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And good luck with your training. And I'm convinced you're going to serve a lot of veterans very, very well. Your heart's in the right place, and wish you all the best in that regard.
Thank you so much.
Brent,
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
you ready?
Yes, sir.
It's all yours.
So thank you to all the panelists who have gone before me. Thank you as well, Tony. And my condolences to those who have lost someone during 9/11 and those who have been affected by it. My heart goes out to you. Before I tell you where I was, I wanted to just kind of tell you a little bit about myself before the military. And then it'll explain why I was where I was. And so, you know, one of the reasons why I joined the military was because I didn't feel good about myself. That was one thing. And about 3 years before I joined the military, I had some issues with alcohol addiction and also drug addiction. And part of that came from some of the different traumas that had happened in my life. And my answer to that was to, you know, medicate, right? Self-medicate. It was a learned behavior. Drug addiction was in my family. And I had gotten to a point where I couldn't really do that anymore. And I turned to the church actually, and I ended up getting about maybe I don't know, maybe 3 years with no drugs, and so that there I was. I still wasn't feeling good about myself. I was living home with my mom, and you know, I was working. I think I was working 2 jobs, and I was like, well, what am I going to do with myself, you know? And the military came into mind, right? And I said, wow, you know, if I served in the military, I'm going to be serving my country. Immediately made me feel good about myself. I'm going to be in, I will have the ability to protect my family, and also it'll be an opportunity for me to get out of my neighborhood, right? And it'll be an opportunity for me to be self-sufficient. And I love the idea, right? And so I joined the military. So I joined the military. I think about, I was in AIT, which is Advanced Individual Training. And so I joined in September 90, and months later, President Bush ordered an airstrike in the Middle East, and it just got really crazy, man. Training got like super intense, and what happened was and even as I'm talking about it now, I'm feeling bad about it. But what happened was I was training, and we jumping over one of the hurdles that we jumped over, and I blew my knee out. And I don't particularly like the way that I was treated after that, but that's a whole nother story. So after that, I eventually got surgery, and then I was put in the medical hold unit just to move along quickly. So I'm in this medical hold unit in Fort Dix, New Jersey. And so there I am. And as I'm there, I'm seeing my guys, these individuals who I trained with, these individuals who I had created this relationship, these individuals who were part of my team, because we deployed. I just didn't deploy with them. They began to come back. And all of those feelings that I felt of not feeling good about myself, they all came back. So with that being said, I was asked, do you want to stay in the military, or would you like to leave with an honorable medical? And I chose to discharge, specifically because I didn't like the way that I was treated after I hurt myself. So I went home. So there I am, I'm home, I'm all by myself, and I turned to what I knew to do. I used a unhealthy mechanism to deal with the feelings that I was going through, and I flopped around for years, right? Like so many of us do. So when 9/11 happened, I happened to be in jail. I was locked up in a facility in Yaphank in Suffolk County. And when the plane hit the tower, I was sleeping. However, when I woke up, like Tony and Benicia said, I thought it was a movie. I'm like, oh, wow, it's a movie. I went back to sleep. I woke up again and the movie's still on. So I'm like, what type of movie is this, man? So I get up and then I find out what's happening and what's going on, right? So the initial incident that happened was that the whole atmosphere in the dorm that I was in changed. Those in power locked the facility down. There was no visits coming in. They shut the phones off for a while. And when the phones came back on, it was a frenzy, right? Everybody became violent. There were individuals who were beating individuals up to get on the phone to talk to their family members. And the feelings that I was going through was that there is nothing that I could do here in this place to help my family or to even see how my family is or how they're doing. And that was that was a lot for me. I just was unavailable to them, you know, and that hurt me a lot. So anyway, you know, I came home and I was, you know, drug addiction secludes you from what's going on in the world, right? And I battled with that for a while, and I finally got myself together. I went to school, I got 2 degrees. I got a job, and I've been at this job for a minute. But in the midst of that, right? And I want to shout out Anissa Leonardo, right? Because she helped me to get a better understanding of what 9/11 really was. And she took us to 9/11 Museum through an organization that I'm like 99.9% sure that she created. And it's called the Military Resilience Foundation. I'm pretty sure that's her baby. And so we got in this, you know, we made it out to Manhattan, and a group of us went into this museum, and we walked around, and we're all together, and we split up, we're going different places and blah, blah, blah. And I decided to go into the area where they had the footage of, I'm not sure what it's called, but there's an area where you can go in and you can walk through, and there are TVs with live footage of what was happening on that day at that time. And I think I made about maybe 10 or 15 steps in there, man, and I had to turn around because I was overwhelmed. And I had to go outside, and I had to get some air, and I had to take a break. And then I ended up going back another time, right, to finish going through this museum, right? And you know, Venetia, I heard you. And so one of the things that I cannot do, and I realize this, and I understand that I need to pay my respects to what happened on 9/11 the way that I could the way I pay my respects to it, the way that's comfortable for me. And I cannot listen to the broadcast. I just can't do it for me. I can't do it. And I respect the fact, please don't take it in any disrespectful way. I respect the fact that this is the way individuals pay their respect to those that they've lost. But for me, it's too much. And I pay my respect in different ways. And so another touch of the gravity and the powerfulness of 9/11 was through my clinical work, right? So I'm an LMSW at this point, but I've sat and I've sat to get some clinical hours at an organization. And I had a couple of individuals come through to do some clinical work with them who were police officers, who were individual first responders, right? And listening to their stories and helping them to work through the trauma that they have sustained has affected me. And so the moral of the story is I've been affected in the latter years more powerfully than I was affected on the day that it happened for me. And for me, that's powerful, you know. I knew that I couldn't join the military again because of what happened. So that was never anything that I could accomplish, right? And so, you know, like Phoenicia, I still serve. I'm still a part of my military family, my veterans family, through my job, which I'm like totally grateful for, and it brings, it feeds me, you know. Working with veterans feeds me. Being on this panel feeds me, and I was grateful, and thank you so much. I'm grateful. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this panel.
I'm almost speechless hearing what you had to say, but I have to say this: it's wonderful hearing what you have to say and how forthright you were and how open you've been. I'm sure everybody on the panel and anybody who's listening has been deeply touched by your journey, and it sounds as though the journey's going in the right direction for you, and that's what's most important. Most important. Samantha, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, you want? Do we have any questions from the folks that are in listening?
So I just want to tell people now you can write your questions in the Q&A, and we'll start taking those. But I just want to thank everyone again. I've known Venetia and Mike and Brent for years. I worked with them in a different capacity, and I learned so much about each of you today that, like, Mike, I told you this on Friday, and I'm going to tell you again with Brent and Venetia. If I didn't think I could respect you more, I do. Like, I don't know how that's possible, that through your stories, I have so much respect for all of you. And the same with Alyssa and Ward. I just haven't worked with you as long as I've worked with them, and I hadn't heard their full stories. And I want to thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that. And I think it was so powerful for the audience to get to hear all these diverse perspectives of what was going on and what was happening. Do you want to comment on each other's stories at all, and like how that impacted you listening to other people?
Well, as the oldest panelist, I just want to mention something that I think is very, very different than all of you, who are a heck of a lot younger than I am. I was in ROTC. I started in 1961. We still had a draft back then. I went to a land-grant college where it was absolutely mandatory. You had to take 2 years of ROTC. I happen to like Air Force Blue better than olive drab, as far as the Army was concerned. So I went Air Force way. I really wanted to be a pilot. I ended up washing out of pilot training and actually thought about getting out of the service. Of course, it was right during the entire Vietnam War. The Air Force Specialty Code that I had, however, took me to places like, back then it was considered remote and hardship duty, a place called Iceland. And another time I was in northern Canada, and another time I was in Greenland. These were the kinds of assignments I had as I was in the North American Air Defense Command. It was the time of the Cold War. I led a parallel service experience. I never saw a war during the Vietnam era. And that's something that I've had to deal with over the years. It wasn't that I hadn't volunteered to go there. I was in a critically manned career field which was always undermanned. And we were in the Cold War back in those days. I call myself a Cold War warrior. That was the job I had. And there is a pecking order to all of this. For those of you who have been in combat, I got to tell you, I got to take a back seat. I always have, even though I spent 20 years in the service. I just have no idea what that's like. I certainly recognize it, but that's been an issue for me for a very, very long time. And that's one of the things that I kind of live with almost every day. Every time I meet somebody who's been there and done that, been in really, really harm's way, I'm humbled by that. And I live with that every day. That's all I have to say on that. So anyway.
There were a lot of things that stuck out to me with everyone, but one, I liked hearing Alyssa and Venetia talk about being a woman in the military, that perspective. Yes. And then I also thought it was really interesting, Brent, that how, and we have talked about this before, but how personally that you took it, that you got injured. It was almost like you're disappointed in yourself that you got injured, and which obviously you didn't do on purpose, you know, just that military thinking there that you've let down, which I'm sure everyone knew that you would much rather be serving than to be having knee problems.
Absolutely. It was how can I describe it? It was a wound. I felt wounded, not my knee, but I felt wounded. I felt like I let myself down, because this is what I joined the military for. This is one of the reasons why I joined, was to serve. Right. So now here we are, countries at war. Right. And I'm training. I'm training with my people. These people who have become a unit for me. And I blow my knee out. And I'm no longer capable to be there. It immediately messed me up. Yeah. You know, and then the response of those who were in power to try to brush it under the carpet like it didn't happen, that hurt even more. You know, but I really felt like I let everybody down. You know what I'm saying? It was painful for me, the whole process.
Yeah, Brent, I mean, I get that. I hear that. And I thank you for your vulnerability. Like, I love how I'm learning things about people through this process that just like define tribe even more, and mission and purpose and camaraderie. I mean, that's why, I mean, we all wanted to be part of something bigger, whether we did all the things we wanted to or not. And yes, Amanda, you're right. We don't get to pick our experience. And the feeling like, I mean, so Brent, it resonates with me that, I mean, when my name wasn't on the list the first year, I was like, okay, I can do this, because I was deployed and they just didn't see how I just wrapped up an awesome deployment and all of that. And I loved the mission. And it was, the funky part of that for me is that it was in a congressionally defined combat zone, but we didn't actually see active combat. And so, Tony, I can connect with what you're saying on a lot of that too. I mean, the only reason that I am a combat veteran is by nature of where I happen to deploy. Certainly things could have blown up and gotten very ugly very fast. They didn't, but that's a hard piece when people ask me if I'm a combat vet. And I have a hard time saying I am, because to me that means something very different. It's not the experience that I physically had. I mean, hazard pay, expeditionary medal, blah, blah, blah. Yes, then that's there. And I'm proud of that. I'm not trying to minimize that in any capacity. but not picking up promotion in a community where I gave everything and then some, and then doing everything and then some at the expense of my family. I mean, on many levels. So Venetia, I can absolutely identify with, yes, I mean, being a mom, being a woman in the military. I mean, my son was born a year after I'd gotten to my command, almost to the day. Well, a little bit more, but anyway, it's a whole other story. But I gave up a year of his life, and I knew raising my right hand and signing my name on the dotted line, I knew that that was part of it, that was what would be asked. And anyway, but when your name's not on that list, you feel like I felt like I let down my community. I felt like I let down my family. I had this training, I had this passion, I had this desire. And why? And now fast forward almost 5 years, here I sit with the most amazing group of warriors that I told Sam in an email over the weekend that the work we're doing here is part of this, is cathartic and healing and cleansing. And it's just an honor to serve with every single one of you. As it is. Anyway, I'm gonna stop talking before I cry. So anyway, I'll let somebody else get all emotional. Come on, Warby, tell a joke, something.
You ready? Okay.
Yes, please, tell a joke, somebody.
Yeah, I mean, war's no joke, but humor is a defense mechanism. My God, we need it. Samantha, can I provide a quick counterpoint or maybe a peripheral perspective to the injury thing? Is that okay?
Oh, please.
Thanks for not saying no. All right, because I had a whole thing. So Brent and Alyssa's experience is really common. A lot of the veterans I've worked with since then, I was a contractor for the VA, and found that damage is oh God, it's no joke. And people are really hurt in so many complicated, psychiatric ways in addition to physical ways, that my own experience seems kind of small, but I try to remember that I was in a combat zone and we came under attack a lot. So we had the main problem was rockets. So these Katyusha rockets that were stacked up from the Soviet era, this is in Afghanistan, the Taliban would take these and they would set two of them up on the mountain surrounding us on these little rice timers that they'd get wet. And as soon as it dried up, the rocket would fire. So it wasn't aimed. It would just randomly fly through the air and careen down, sometimes on top of us. So we had that, and we had a perimeter probed a few times, but those never lasted long. We had a really good, it's called QRF, Quick Reaction Force team that would run out and respond to those. And we had these incredible artillery systems where if anyone ever fired on us, the round was still coming through the air, we could triangulate its location and fire it back before the first round actually hit, which was amazing. So it was like this almost defense shield in a way. But one of these rockets did hit me. And it sounds really dramatic. I got hit by a rocket, but let me tell you, it's more just stupid. I was walking to the bathroom, okay, just to start with. And it was all gravel everywhere, and there's these barracks along the way, and then the bathrooms are like these kind of big metal systems that are, you could punch your hand through it if you're really determined. So I'm walking with my little shower thing. I've got my little flip flops, and I'm just in my, it's like PT uniform. So I didn't look too cool, and I'm walking to the bathroom, and this red alert comes in, ding, ding, ding. I'm like, oh, geez, maybe I should get into some cover. Nah, I'll be fine. Nothing's ever really come close yet. And then suddenly I'm thrown through the air. It seemed like 100 feet, but it was more like 20. And I hit the side of the bathroom and slide down. And I'm stupid enough that I've had so many water ski accidents in my life and weird stuff. The first thing I do is I'm checking, can I feel my fingers? Can I feel my toes? I'm good. And I literally started laughing like, ha, you missed, suckers. And you didn't get me. It took out an entire bee hut. It just blew right up. There's nobody in it at the time. Everyone's, working. So it really just hit me and a bunch of people that were kind of stunned, and the alarms are going off for the next few minutes. But the sad part is that I've got these permanent this permanent damage to my lower back. I had it checked out. It just kind of sore, no big deal. But it's just, I have to be moving or exercising, and otherwise it's really painful. But other than that, you know, what I experienced is nothing compared to the damage so many veterans have suffered from. And when Brent was talking, I was thinking about like a guy who was instructed to fire on anyone that came out at night in this area under a bridge in Iraq, a Marine, you know. And he's a Marine, so he's not a bad guy, right? But he fired on and just killed an entire family. And I mean, this guy's still living with that. He just lives in a little town, and he lives way out in the woods now. And I check on him and hang out with him, but he's a completely different person than he was before. And I actually knew him when I was a teacher. He's just a good kid, excited and enthusiastic. And now he's just this quiet, kind of hurt, damaged guy. I'll stop there because I don't want to get controversial on some thoughts on disability and compensation. So there's the story.
So I find it interesting that, and I think this again is like, we don't know things about people unless we share. And, you know, I hope everybody that's watching is picking up on, you know, the vulnerability that everybody is, you know, allowing to shine through their stories. And that even though we served and then chose to, or were forced to in some way, discontinue our time, you know, in the service, we've continued to pursue something, you know, like we've had to do some self-reflection. We've had to ask for help. We've had to do, you know, a lot of, you know, dirty work to get where we are now, where we're once again serving people, for the most part, that are, you know, that are serving us, you know, through the armed forces. And I just think that's, you know, wherever you were on that day and however it impacted you, it's like, just look at how these roads just lead us to connection, right? And serving other people, I think right now is just, it's going to be so important, because a lot of the people that are now going to be coming out of the military and needing help are going to be people that chose to serve in the military because of September 11th.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think it's just unbelievably important for us to just recognize that could be a very big influence on these young men and women who are coming out, and many of whom are still going to have 40, 50 years of life left to live. You know, for us to recognize how important that ability to share these stories are, and then just to connect with each other, because like, look, we're all connected through this one thing, right? Regardless of how else we may be connected, like 9/11 has brought us together, and we're sharing with each other about that and hearing each other. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. And I'm just hoping that everybody who's watching sees the power of connection, you know, and the power of, you know, like Brent, I hear you, you know, feeling like you let people down, you know, and here you are sitting with us, sharing your story, sharing this pain and helping people, you know, and like, that's awesome, man. And so that's what I wanted to say. The only other thing I had truly was in this has always bugged me. It still does. And I work with it. I honestly, I'm more uncomfortable in this situation than when somebody comes up to me and is like, oh, thank you for your service. Like if I'm ever asked for my birthday, I very often get, oh, that sucks. Like, oh, you were born on 9/11. Oh man, that's terrible. And and I'm always just like totally caught off guard by that. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to respond to that. It makes me terribly uncomfortable. So I just wanted to put that out there. I don't have any like insight into that, but if you run across somebody who's born on 9/11, don't say that. I'm just, from my own experience, like it's like, I'm very often not without words. That usually leaves me in that space. So, thanks.
I have a question for you, Mike. How do you celebrate your birthday now?
Oh boy. So this year I celebrated my birthday doing a 3.5 hour presentation on moral injury. So there's that. But then I went golfing yesterday or on Saturday with some friends at Peak and Peak. Usually there's a football game around the time of my birthday, and I'm a huge Bills fan, so I do that. Um, there was an event a couple of years ago down by a river near our house where they put up a full-size American flag for every person who was lost, and there was a story connected to each flag. So you could literally go and read thousands of stories, and it was just incredible. So doing that, putting flags out, we'll go out from time to time and put flags out. Mostly, I'm pretty quiet in terms of how I reflect on things, except in these situations. But I don't think it's wrong for me to celebrate my life. I'm not gonna live in I feel as though the gift that I have to still be alive should be celebrated, because every single person I would imagine that passed away would not want people to live their life in vain because they happen to be born on a day that so many people died. And just to have quiet reflection, is something that I tend to do. So
Your birthday is historical now, so you shouldn't feel guilty for celebrating your birthday, even if it's on 9/11.
No, and I don't. I definitely don't. I think I did at some point, but it's led me to where I am today, and the universe conspires to make certain things happen, and I just feel like this is one of those things. So hope to continue to use it as something that motivates me to keep doing what I'm doing. Thanks for asking that, though. Not many people.
My birthday's 9/4, so it's always around this time anyways. It's a week before.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, mine is Wednesday. It's just had a wild weekend. But I was just thinking how everything changed on that day. The world changed. The entire future pivoted on that particular morning. And here we are, was it 14 years later? I'm not really good with math, but no, maybe it's more.
19
years later. I knew that, but so much has changed in these almost 20 years.
Yeah.
We're still talking about it. It still feels like it was yesterday. It's so fresh and it's so raw, and it's already history. That there's, somebody said earlier, there's like my daughter was born in 2006. She was what's called an R&R baby. Some of you might know what that means. And so I basically you get these 2 weeks off, and you can spend those 2 weeks enjoying Europe, or you can anyway. So then that was what I came home to, but she never even was there, which is so weird. Somebody's so important in someone's life, and where were you in 9/11? I didn't exist. I think it's such an opportunity now, Samantha. Thank you for making this all happen, and whoever else did, because we're all thinking about that. Where were all of us as NASW members, as social workers? How did this change our lives and our future, our careers, our families, our communities? What a great, crucial moment in time to examine and think about now.
Thank you, Ward. And that's so, Amelia. Thank Amelia. We work as a team to make all this happen. But I always like to end by the panelists leaving with some last words. So would you all like to leave with some last words?
I'll start. Again, as a reminder, I think I said at the last panel, the military experience is not a monolithic experience. We each have had ups and downs and dramatically different experiences. And I think that's an important lesson for civilians who have no military contact at all, that when you look and you speak and you meet folks that are military, put the stereotypes aside, put the generalizations aside, and listen to the personal narratives.
That's great. Alyssa?
I mean, I'm sorry, I just second that. I mean, everybody has their journey, their story, their narrative, and it has value and meaning and purpose. And Ward, I liked your question in the chat box about, looking at, is it all negative? And no. And so as clinicians, we often don't see people when life is roses and sunshine. Although we all like having those cases where it's like, oh, life is great for you, let's make it even better. But it can be helping our people move through that with value, with dignity, with respect. And I mean, I will tell my folks, you don't have to go back to whatever brought you through my door in the first place. You don't. And if you believe that about yourself, we've got work to do, and we will work on that, because I don't believe that about you. I work with outpatient veterans in substance abuse recovery who also, many of which, maybe not so shocking, they also have PTSD. Not all of them do, but a large number do. Anyway, but it's, your experience has brought you here, but they don't tell the whole story, and they are a part of your story, not all of it. And I want to help you put words to that, so you have that as part of your narrative in your healing process. But there's value in every bit of it. I mean, even for all of us sharing today our vulnerabilities, is what makes us who we are. It's what brought all of us collectively here. And it's what makes us a tribe. That it does. So, all right, I'm gonna stop talking. Promise.
Thank you.
Let me jump in. I'm the wrong one to be the last guy. So somebody like Brent or Tony, Mike, but I think the word plethora is great because it says a lot. And it means a lot, but also that's a joke. The thinking, like the opportunity that the military does and provides is extraordinary. I mean, it's not monolithic, it is monolithic, but it's also everywhere. If you're an American, you know someone who's been in the military, you know someone who's gone through the whole experience. I mean, they let me do stand-up comedy in Afghanistan because they didn't have anybody else. And that started out with, anyone here from out of town, and just kind of went downhill. But I never would have had that chance. I was actually prescribing psychotropic medications because somebody in the Navy let me. I couldn't believe that. Learned so much about the military. I mean, there's all these different parts of the military. The Army's the best, but there's other ones as well, like the Navy and the Air Force, and they should never be forgotten, even though they're not as important as the Army. But I'll leave you with the final thought. Sorry, Tony.
How dare you?
All right. Yeah, Alyssa is with the Navy and she's silenced, so she can't say anything. But there's a little friendly competition among the services. But in the end, the main thought here is that every single American was incredibly impacted by this, and we just happen to be the ones that, for one reason or another at that time were specifically impacted. But the people watching right now, you were there. Love to hear what it was like for you, and that echo, that impact is never going to leave us. It's a generation that is living in a different world because of what happened on that Tuesday 19 years ago. It still feels like yesterday. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ward.
Okay.
Yeah. Common humanity. We're all people. And you can see, like, we can share experiences that may be difficult to talk about, and then sit with each other and then laugh afterwards, and because it's okay to have struggled. It's okay to have been through things that are difficult and have, maybe have not worked out the way that people have wanted to. That's life, right? For everybody in some way, shape, or form. So keeping all that stuff below board because we want to we're more concerned about how others will perceive us than living an authentic life. These are our stories. We should be encouraged to tell them more often. And I really think that would help, create more of this tribal feeling where we're closer with each other, that, you can talk to me and I can still see you as a person, despite anything that you've been through or has happened to you. And it's something that we need to do more of as a community of people. And if 9/11 is the common thread that can connect millions and millions of people, because everybody has a story about how this impacted them, where they were, maybe not the 19-year-olds and lower at this point, but like, we can use something that was devastating as a way to continue to connect. And so that's just, I believe in the power of story very much. And I'm just happy to be a part of this and to be able to share mine and hear everybody else's. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mike.
And I agree with Mike in terms of sharing stories. And life throws us curveballs all the time. And 9/11 was one of them. But ultimately, it's how we deal with those negative circumstances. How do we rise above that? And how do we survive all of that trauma and all of the negative connotation that goes along with 9/11. So for me, it's how we get above water and how do we stay above water and how do we survive and be strong at the end. Stay strong.
Are you going to let Ward say that about the Army and get away with that? I thought you might.
No, we're keeping our trophy. No, we're keeping our trophy. No.
You know what?
Get him.
Revenge is sweet.
The Air Force team, we don't deal with any of that ground stuff.
Okay. So when you go TDY and can take your family, then that's a different experience there, Tony. No. Navy blue is the blue that is out there. And I'm sorry, yeah. I can do this all day.
Having worked on an admiral staff once upon a time, I love being called captain.
See, do y'all know he just pulled rank? Did you notice that he just pulled 05 rank on? Yeah.
Well, when I was in 03, I was called captain, and I had chief master sergeants. I mean, they would just stand at attention, kind of thing. So yes.
The pampered Air Force, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
King crab legs every day for breakfast. Okay, moving on. Yeah.
Brent, are you going to take us out here?
Yes, I definitely will. So I just want to encourage everybody to do your very best to get in the solution. A very close friend of mine told me it's all right if you want to, wallow maybe in self-pity for a day or two or whatever, but you need to get into the solution. And this veteran population is a population that's hurting, not like any other population, right? But if you did decide that you wanted to help this population, you are very well needed. And I want to encourage those of you who are civilians to let you know that just because you're a civilian, it does not mean that you cannot help us. And where am I getting that from? I'm getting that from a personal story. That's part of my story. So I encourage you to be yourself, And thank you so much for being with us. Go Army.
Thank Thank you all. I'm really
Yes,
happy that everyone got to hear the humor, because I've worked with veterans for a long time now, and that humor is so key. And I've laughed with all of you, and I've laughed with every veteran that I've worked with. I think it's important people know that. Oh God, like Ward. So thank you all. And I hope you join us for our next panel, which will be in October. We'll be advertising that soon, and it will be a women veterans panel. So you'll see Alyssa and Venetia again on that, as well as some of our other women who volunteer with our committee. So I hope you all have a nice day. And panelists, if you don't mind staying on for just a second, if you have time. Thank you.